Good morning, everybody. It's 2026, they say.
Yep.
Have a good week?
Yep. Did you have X-Wing?
What?
X-Wing next week, no X this week.
Okay. Well, I'm not talking to you anyway. You know that. Where's Lisa? There she is. Am I talking to you? Is that why? All my troublemakers are here and accounted for now? Great. All right, we are in the book of Judges, rolling through the text here, talking about these judges. Let's do a simple recap theologically. What does the word judge mean here in this context? Savior, what? Lisa? Somebody smarter than us? Well, not necessarily. We got some people here that we're going to be talking about. Yeah, well, you know, they represent the nation of Israel pre-Reformation, if you will, from Josiah, back further on in the context. But they're not doing great so far because they're kind of fragmented, right? So there used to be a thing, I don't know if it's still a thing or not, but back in the day, in 2005-ish, like Windows operating system, you used to have to defragment the hard drive, but now we have SSDs. Do you still do that or no? You don't do that anymore? That was my favorite thing to do when I worked for the county, was to go in and install the roaring hardware that they had there, these cow-shaped and colored boxes that had the desktop in it. What brand was that? Was that Dell? Gateway, that's the one. And we have to go in and steal the RAM from the storage closet that's not ventilated, or everything is soggy and wet, and you pull the RAM out of there to put in the new one. So anyway, fragmentation, that is what comes to my brain immediately, is defragging a hard drive. It's probably an optical hard drive. Do you have to do that with? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. That's how limited my expertise was. I got a 70 on my Windows certificate. I didn't study for it, so I guessed and didn't do great. So the nation of Israel is fragmented. They are all over the place because it should have been ideally that Joshua set them up for success. At the end of his book, or the book that bears his name, we've got him making kind of a last-ditch effort and saying, listen, you're going to have choices to make. And these choices are, you can serve the gods that your forefathers served back before Abraham, or you can serve the gods that are over this river that we've crossed over the Jordan River. But as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. And so that should have been kind of like the statement for every household, every tribe, every clan, every family, to say, hey, listen, you know what? No matter what anyone does around us, we are going to serve the Lord, Yahweh. And we're going to be a beacon of hope and light for our neighborhood, if you will, back in the day. But that's not what happened at all. We have the people here of Israel in the land of Canaan, and they are bowing down to every god they can find, seemingly. And so what we've talked about thus far is we've had a couple of good guys pop up. Ehud was one that we talked about. He's a classic because he's one of those assassin video game characters. That's basically what he is. And so here we have Deborah and Barak talking about, in chapter 5, their situation. I mean, if you want to summarize that, you have a woman prophetess of the Lord being utilized here. A lot of people try to make Deborah being a judge something maybe more significant than it ought to be. But let's not miss the obvious thing here. God did use a woman here in a leadership role to bring about his will through her. So that's the last context we were in last week. Now we are in chapter 6, and we are moving on to a different region. After we have Deborah being a judge, we then have the same cycle repeat that we've gotten used to thus far. So in chapter 6, of Judges chapter 6, verse 1, the Israelites did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. I mean, come on. It's been 40 years, according to the ending of chapter 5. The land had peace for 40 years. Israelite got comfortable in that 40 years. A generation grows up, and they are now doing evil in the sight of the Lord. You might just insert here in your own mind the idea that they are worshiping idols again. That's kind of the first and second commandment. They're falling right in that same trap. So the Lord handed them over to Midian 7 years, and they oppressed Israel, as it goes, right? Because of Midian, the Israelites made hiding places for themselves in the mountains, the caves, and the strongholds. Whenever the Israelites planted crops, the Midianites, Amalekites, and the people of the east came and attacked them. They encamped against them and destroyed the produce of the land, even as far as Gaza. They had nothing left for Israel to eat, as well as no sheep, ox, or donkey. For the Midianites came with their cattle and their tents like a great swarm of locusts. They and their camels were without number, and they entered the land to lay waste to it. So Israel became poverty-stricken because of Midian, and the Israelites cried out to the Lord. So we have cycle 1, 2, and 3 kind of going along this tract, right? So we have them doing wickedness. We have God raising up a foreign nation to oppress them. And then we have them crying out to God. Repentance would be kind of a word to throw in there for an umbrella to say that they are crying out to God for deliverance now. So God brings a deliverer, as he does. So, before we get into the actual deliverer, any questions, comments, thoughts?
This
Mary?
talks about Israelites.
Mm-hmm.
So was it the entire nation, or was it
No.
just pieces, parts? Because
Yeah, it's no, not all of Israel. Everybody wait, just making sure. Just a test. No, it's used kind of categorically. So we have people of the nation of Israel in certain regions being oppressed here. We'll get into in maybe a chapter. This next guy, Gideon, by the way, is a longer, detailed, more account of what he does. And you'll see the tribes that are mentioned here. It's not all of Israel. Okay? We are hopping around in the book of Judges because there's no unification of Israel, because there shouldn't really have been a need for them to be seen as a single nation. They should have been the nation of Israel, but where they were all had prophecies correlating to who their ancestors were and what the future held for them. There should have been no need for the Israelites as a nation to be seen as a unified thing. If that makes any sense. It's not really until they asked for King Saul, and Samuel's upset about that they really become unified, and then there's a big split, which is what happens when you become unified in that way. Yeah. Right.
but that wasn't always happening.
It was never happening. Yeah. The whole point was for them to be different and distinct from the Canaanites who were in that land originally. That they have one God, and this is what God requires, and we have the tablet from him, and we've got the Ark of the Covenant, and God's presence is with us. And none of that is happening the way God wanted to, because they kept getting these idols.
Are they outside of?
Yeah, I mean, technically, they're what you might put in the category of the nations that were in there. So you've got, 5 major groups of people that are kind of considered Canaanites because they lived in the land of Canaan, but before they were known as something else. So Canaanites, yes, But specifically, they're not like Philistines or anything. They're a different group than that.
Right.
But Canaanites formerly, yes. Okay, so verse 7, it kind of slows it down a little bit, and then it picks it back up. Okay, verse 7. When the Israelites cried out to him because of Midian, the Lord sent a prophet to them. So this is a little bit distinct than the other ones thus far. We don't normally have a prophet being raised up unless that prophet is the judge, like Deborah, for example. Here we have a prophet being sent, and he, the prophet, said to them, "This is what the Lord," that's Yahweh, God of Israel, says, "I brought you out of Egypt and out of the place of slavery." Well, did he? Yeah, the ancestors, right? Not them specifically, because they grew up in a time where they're already in the promised land. Things have already been delivered to them. And the way it should have gone was, you know that I am the God that saved you from Egypt, because no doubt your dad told you, whose dad told him, whose dad told him, whose dad told him that that's where you came from. That's your national heritage, right? So they should have known that, but he's reminding them, hey, we've got a story together, you and me, and we're in the middle of it, and you know who I am, hopefully. I rescued you from the power of Egypt and the power of all who oppressed you. Just for commentary's sake, how formidable were the Amalekites and the Midianites compared to the Egyptians? Well,
No, the Egyptians had possession of the Israelites.
okay, let me ask you this question this way. If you wanted to go up against a nation, would you want to go against the Midianites who lived in Midian, or do you want to go up against the Egyptian nation?
The Egyptians were a world power.
Yeah. So you have the first empire ever. The first empire ever, if you're leaving the Fertile Crescent here, is Egypt. And they're around for a very long time. You don't want to go against the Egyptians. So I think the point of what God is reminding them is, I've already saved you from a nation far more formidable than the Midianites. They're nothing to God. If the Egyptians can't stand in his way, then no doubt he can save them from this distress, right? We have the 10 plagues, all which go against a deity in the Egyptian nation. And he says, they're nothing, they're nothing, they're nothing, they're nothing. And then he goes to the Midianites, and that's the problem now. So here's kind of the commentary, right? He's saying, I saved you from Egypt and everyone that oppressed you. I drove them out before you and gave you their land. I said to you, I am the Lord your God. Do not fear the God of the Amorites, whose land you live in, but you did not obey me. So the prophet's message is, this is not news to me that you are being oppressed by the Amalekites or the Amorites. Oh, yeah.
Complaining about the fact that they should have stayed in Egypt.
The constant complaint to Moses was, so you mean to tell me, Moses, you brought us all the way out here just to have us starve, to die of thirst. And God said, come on, guys, just come on, stay with me here. I'm going to give you everything you need. We really want some meat. We're tired of this bread. Ugh. And then he says, okay, you want some meat? I'll give you some quail. How about that? Right? So, again, same message. And then we've got this. Couple of theophanies here, which are interesting. I wish we had an answer for certain, but we definitely do not. But here in verse 11, the angel, a.k.a. messenger of the Lord, came and sat under the oak that was in Ophrah. Not Oprah, it's a whole different thing, right? So you have the angel of the Lord. So what is significant about the title, the angel of the Lord? If you've been in my class for more than a week, You should have heard this once or twice before, right?
Maybe Jesus.
Maybe Jesus. Okay, that's to put it very bluntly. Maybe Jesus, because there's some weird stuff that happens whenever the angel of the Lord shows up, right? Exodus chapter 3, you've got Moses taking care of Jethro, his father-in-law's sheep, and there's a mountain, and he's on the mountain, he sees a bush on fire, which is pretty cool. You got to stop and look at it, because if you're a man, you have to stop and look at fire. That's what you got to do, right? Any guy ever see a fire and not stop and look at it for a second? You have to, right? So Moses says, hey, look, bush on fire, that's pretty cool. He looks at it, goes, it's not burning up though. Like, it's not really catching. That's weird. And then a voice from the midst of the burning bush tells him, take off your sandals because the place where you're standing is holy. Well, the mountain wasn't holy. The bush wasn't holy because it's on fire, right? So what made it holy? Well, the voice that came from the midst of the burning bush, he identified himself as the angel of the Lord, but he also identified himself as God, which is weird, right? You don't have messengers or angels usually say, here's what God says, by the way, I'm him, right? You don't ever have that, really, unless you see that title, the angel of the Lord. And so here we have the angel of the Lord, and he came and sat under the oak that was in Ophrah, which belonged to Joash. We all know him, the Abizarite. Okay, if you don't know Joash, he's the daddy of Gideon. So just so you know, we're in family land here, right? Okay. His son, Gideon, was threshing wheat in the winepress in order to hide it from the Midianites. So he's threshing wheat. What does that mean? Okay, so you've got wheat, and then you beat it really, really hard, and you got this husk that's around there called the chaff, right? So the ancient way to remove the chaff, the husk, from the actual kernel of the wheat is if you hit it, you throw it in the air, and then the actual good stuff you want is heavier, so it stays, and all the chaff blows away. That's the idea, right? It's like the opposite of gold panning. If you've been gold panning before, like gold is heavy, so you swirl it around in the bucket, right, in the pan, and then all the heavy stuff, the gold, stays, but all the dirt just kind of goes away. That's the idea. I saw this being done in real time in Kenya when I was there, because they had their crops and they had the wheat, and they were there and they were beating it, and then they had it laid out to dry because they had to use water to get the chaff off. Is how they did it. And so he's there in the wine press, so kind of incognito, taking care of the wheat. We've already read the commentary from God about what it was like in that day. This would be a very lucrative thing because people were starving to death, and they've got a crops, and they're taking care of the crops. Okay. Verse 12. Then the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, the Lord is with you, valiant warrior. Well, I mean, that's one way to put it. Hang on. There we are. I was reading this week in preparation for the class, make sure to misread anything, and then we've got ESV verse 12, the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, the Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor. Now, if you don't know, that's a very specific title for this guy. Anyone heard that phrase, mighty man of valor, before? Yeah, Nimrod. He really is a Nimrod, am I right? Where I'm going with this is whenever you get to like King David, he's got mighty men of valor, and these guys are legends, right? Like if the 15-year-old boy inside of you does not get stoked about Ehud stabbing a fat guy and his knife, he can't get his knife back because he's so fat the fat encloses around him. If that was like, oh, awesome. If you like that, then mighty men of valor is a whole other thing. Like, just go to Samuel, book of Samuel, and then just read about the mighty men of valor, because every single one of them did something amazing in combat against a formidable enemy or multiple enemies, and like their name went down. Of David's mighty men of valor, there was one guy in particular who stands out. Unfortunately, David did murder him, Uriah the Hittite. He was a Hittite, not an Israelite. And he was loyal to King David of Israel. So it kind of shows you the dichotomy there of David. How far did you go? Well, I killed one of the guys that you converted to be an Israelite, a proselyte. That ain't great. So there's the title in the ESV. Anyway, CSB, going back to kind of get some more more use out of it. There we go. All right. The Lord's with you, valiant warrior. Then Gideon says, please, my Lord, this is not the Yahweh name. This is my sir, my Lord, my liege, if you will. If the Lord, Yahweh, is with us, why has all this happened? And where are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about? Oh, so they did get passed on. Great news. They said, hasn't the Lord brought us out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and handed us over to Midian. Well, funny you bring that up. You think the Lord's abandoned you and won't deliver you from the hand of Midian? Well, the Lord turned to him and said, so this is where we have some kind of fuzzy titles, right? So the angel of the Lord is there under this tree while Gideon happens to be there threshing wheat, and he's doing it in a wine press to remain incognito. And then the angel of the Lord tells Gideon something, and then Gideon has a response about what the Lord has done. And then verse 14, the Lord turned to him. That's Lord Yahweh. So Yahweh turned to him. So here we have again that fuzziness of who is the one present. We have the angel of the Lord and we have Yahweh being in the same place in the same time, doing the same thing, talking to Gideon, right? So again, just so you know, you will find a couple of these throughout the Old Testament. You see a whole lot of this kind of in the New Testament with the guy behind me. What's that? Well, you like to think so. I mean, I'll tell you, if you want to write a paper about it and prove it, you wouldn't be the first one to try. That's the problem here, is because the language here is so unspecific on purpose, you can't prove it. There's always an explanation from the rabbis of why this can't be God, but it's God. So.
You can't look at God or see God and,
Yeah.
So.
And live, yeah.
God sort of knows that, so he says, okay, I'll be an angel. Now, I know that is very simplistic, but that, God he could have been an oak tree.
I suppose he could have been an oak tree, yeah. I mean, he spoke through a donkey before he could be an oak tree. I think, though, it's a bit more clever, because when you look at this, you're trying to wrestle with, what are we talking about here? Like, what's the point of all this? Why would God go this many times into a confusing place where either it's God speaking or an angel speaking or both at the same time? And then other times it's just an angel and he doesn't want worship, and he specifies who he is by his name and says, I'm just an angel, just a messenger. I think what God's trying to do here is get us to kind of to sift through the wheat, the chaff here to find the wheat. Like, okay, this is going off a little bit, but have you ever read the Bible and been a little confused about something? I know Lisa never has, but I have sometimes, right? And been a little confused by it, and you're like, why did God make this one so hard? Like, every time I study about hell or about marriage, divorce, and remarriage, those two in particular, always going, why couldn't he just tell me what the answer is? Why do I have to sift through all this and try to figure it out? Well, the figuring it out is part of the plan, right? If you don't care, you won't spend the time to kind of figure it out. You won't dive deeper into the issues to show your concern, and you won't grow through that struggle, through that wrestling, right?
Teachers call that productive struggle.
Productive struggle, the teacher says. Well, it's kind of like God says, hey, you want to grow? You want to exercise this part of your brain? Well, you got to use your brain to figure it out. So I'm not saying that everything is difficult. I'm just saying it's some things seem to be more difficult, and this is one of them theologically. Like if you're okay looking at this thing, this is God, no problem, move on. Okay, fair enough. I get it. But you're going to run into it a lot. And so you got to figure out what you want to say. And I don't feel comfortable confirming this is Jesus before we know him as Jesus, because Paul didn't do that either. And he kind of knew Jesus pretty well. Okay, here's what the Lord says. He said, okay, so you see the problem, right? Amalekites, Midianites, they're there. Go in strength. Go in the strength you have. Deliver Israel from the grasp of Midian. I'm sending you. So it's kind of like, as the situation goes, if you've got a complaint about something and you bring it up to the leaders and you don't have a solution to the problem that you're bringing to their attention, it's kind of like, hey, you just volunteered to solve this issue. I'm so glad you brought it up. Here's a problem. I need someone who knows about the problem to go fix it. You're that guy, right? Gideon's like, where'd the Lord go? Saved us from the Egyptians, apparently, my dad said, and then here we are, we're being oppressed again. What's God going to do about this? He goes, hey, great news. You're the guy to go. He says, go in the strength you have. You've got it, big guy. Go ahead. Verse 15, he said, please, Lord, here we go. He said, how can I deliver Israel? I'm just a young kid in my family, kind of taking care of the food situation here. Look, my family is the weakest in Manasseh, and I'm the youngest in my father's family. He says, I am the runt of the litter. We're not a well-known name. We're not a fighting force. I'm just a guy in a wine press trying to hide the wheat from the Midianites. Come on now. And then, of course, verse 16, but, hey, I will be with you. The Lord said to him, you will strike Midian down as if it were one man. So, here's the moment, right? This is always the moment. When God says, hey, I'm going to be with you. You're going to win this thing. You're going to do a great job. And then what does the person do? Either they say, hey, we are well able to overcome it, like Joshua and Caleb of the 12 spies who went out and saw the land. Right? Remember this? The 12 spies went out, and you had 12 spies, and 10 of them said, we were like grasshoppers in their sight. And there are giants there. These guys are huge. They are scary. There is no way we can do this. But God had already said before the spies went out, you can go. This is your land. I'll be with you. You got it. You have Joshua and Caleb saying, we are well able to overcome it. Let us go up at once, Scripture says, right? Those two guys got a good report, and they were allowed to be Joshua and Caleb in the next story, right? So here is Gideon, poor little guy. He got a complaint to God. God says, you are the God to solve the problem. I'll be with you. You will strike them down as if they were just one big bad guy. Not a problem. So what does Gideon do? Verse 17. He said to him, if I found favor with you, starting out gently, give me a sign that you are speaking with me. All right, it's a little confusing to read that. Is he asking, am I crazy or not? Or is he looking for confirmation that the person he's speaking to is from God? Could be both. Whatever the case, it seems like he's scared. If I were him, I bet I'd be scared too. Because if you heard legends about this Yahweh God that you serve and what he's done for you, and now you're thrown into the middle of the story. You're part of it, right? So here's what he suggests. Verse 18. Please do not leave this place until I return to you. Like, all right, hear me out. I'm going to go away. You don't leave. You stay right here, okay? Let me bring my gift and set it before you. Let me just bring you something, and that will confirm in my mind if you're actually God or not. Okay, so here's his plan. He said, I will stay until you return, which is cool that God's like letting him do this, because God doesn't owe him anything, right? He could be like Exodus 3, where Moses is like, hey, I'm not the guy for you. I'm just a shepherd. I mean, I already tried to overthrow the Egyptians once. That got scary. People didn't like me. I ran away. I mean, here I am. And God just said, no, I made your mouth. I made your tongue. You can go. I'll be with you. Just get out of here. Moses, go. There's time to go. But he says, okay, I'll stay. I'll stay right here. Whatever you need, Gideon. Verse 19. So Gideon went and prepared a young goat. Well, that's a very polite way to say it. You know, he didn't prepare him to be like presented. He killed him and then had the meat. Okay. And unleavened bread from a half bushel of flour. He placed the meat in a basket, in the broth in a pot. He brought them out and offered them to him under the oak. So this doesn't seem like a burnt offering before God. Because first of all, the Ark of the Covenant isn't anywhere near here where we are. There's no altar. He's like, let me bring you a meal and see what you do with it. Here's some really good stew, young goat, and here's some bread. Here you go. What are you going to do with this? The angel of God said to him, take the meat with the unleavened bread, put it on this stone, and pour the broth on it. So he did that. What a waste of good stew. I'll tell you what. So he says, stay right here, I'll be right back. Goes and prepares a stew, which takes a minute or two. Brings it back, offers it to the angel. The angel says, pour it out on this rock right here. He goes, all right, I'll do that. The angel of the Lord extended the tip of the staff that was in his hand. By the way, this dude this whole time had a staff in his hand. Okay? He touched the meat and the unleavened bread. Fire came up from the rock and consumed the meat and the unleavened bread. Then the angel of the Lord vanished from his sight. I mean, there are a couple of things that happened in Scripture I would have loved to get like an iPhone recording of what that looked like. This is one of them. This is not an unusual, it's a pretty strange story, right? It's not every day you read this kind of stuff. All right. So he wanted confirmation that the person that he spoke to actually was God. He gives him a meat, broth, bread offering. It's consumed immediately by fire, which apparently was not on the rock. And then gone. Cool. Verse 22. When Gideon realized that he was the angel of the Lord, so apparently there was some confirmation needed. He looked like just some guy. He said, oh no, Lord God, I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face. Now he's freaking out because he saw God. Verse 23, the Lord said to him, he's not there anymore. The guy's not. Peace to you. Don't be afraid. You're not going to die. So Gideon built an altar to the Lord there and called it, the Lord is peace. And by the way, at the time of this writing, it is still in Ophrah of the Abiezrites today. Cool. I mean, that's interesting. That's different than Ehud going in there and stabbing some guy that's large, right? Poor little Gideon. Talking to God, didn't know it, wasn't sure, and then he was terrified of dying, even though God gave him a mission to do. Okay. Questions, comments about that one? It's a weird one. It gets weirder, but it's a weird one. No thoughts?
To me, it's like it confirms that is within one of the Lord of the Trinity of the Lord there, because
Yeah.
other places you see angels refusing worship, this guy accepts it, so that tells me. it
Not
is-
only like reverence and worship, but like a literal offering, right?
Yeah.
That's rare.
Yeah, I read it a little different because he didn't, when he first showed up, the man showed up, he didn't recognize him as the angel fall on his face and
Yeah, yeah,
try to worship.
yeah.
He just thought some dude comes up and tells you the story. Okay, well, I'm intrigued. Let's go. Let's eat over this.
Yeah,
And
Yeah.
then this happens. Like, okay, now I know who I was talking to.
yeah,
And I remember Abraham and the
yeah.
strangers
Oh
that
yeah,
come
oh
to
yeah.
him.
Uh-huh. Same thing, right? Just some random dude walks over to you and tells your wife, who's ancient, hey, you're gonna have a kid. She laughs, ha 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 ha. Okay, I'm changing your name now to Sarah, who laughs, right? 'Cause, like, let me make a meal for you. And they have a meal, kinda, right? Abraham's like bargaining with God there. It's an interesting situation.
Might also show that he used scripture, because it was afraid when he realized that it was an
Well, yeah, well, I mean, whatever happened here freaked him out. He thought he was going to die, even after getting a mission.
He had heard the stories of
You'd hope so.
Moses when he
Yeah.
was out on the mountain, and he was told, no one can see me face to face
And live. So he's thinking, well, I've seen him face to face, so I'm going to die.
Yeah. When God gives you a mission, He's not going to kill you immediately for accepting the mission. But, I mean, I see it, right? It's a scary thing. Okay, so Gideon so far has needed one thing. Yeah.
I think it fits here. Okay, he talks to him, he says, okay, I know the history, the story of this God who's supposed to have done this stuff.
Yeah.
So that's being passed on. I had a thought, where's the priesthood at this point in time? Because the priesthood was
Yeah.
cast as being the spiritual leadership, the guidance, part of it is the father passing down to the children,
Yeah.
but there's this, we're doing these sacrifices every year. Where's that? There's a disconnect there.
Yeah, so there's no temple yet. There's still a tabernacle. There's still a Shiloh, I think, at this time in history. And so there's going to be this like spiritual center of where the priests are. They don't have a plot of land that God gave them, so they're kind of supposed to be nomadic.
The Levites were all through.
Yeah, they're supposed to go all through and kind of be the intercessor of the people to God. The prophets were the ones who were used to speak from God to the people, kind of, right? We don't see them active. Now, they were competing at the time in the hearts and minds of the people with the other Canaanite gods. So at best, at this time in history, they were one among many, right? We'll see, they know how to worship Baal, but they're not really sure how to worship Yahweh. So they failed too. Okay, we're going to pause here. In verse 25 of chapter 6, Gideon's got a small little thing he's going to do and then be terrified while he's doing it, and then he's got a bigger thing that's going to happen right after this into chapter 7. So we'll pick up Gideon, Lord willing, next week. Thank you for your time and your attention. We'll be dismissed now for about 18 minutes before worship begins.